back. Well, today marks the last day of the 16 days of activism, but the fight is far from over. If the recent crime stats are anything to go by, South Africa's bloodbath of violent crime remains out of control, and women and children are not safe even in their own homes. As the curtain comes down on 16 days of activism, what can government do to improve laws and services to end violence against women for good? I'm joined now by GBV Activist Caroline Peters. Caroline, thank you so much for your time this morning. Very good morning to you. You know what is sad, Caroline, is that year on year we keep having 16 days of activism of no violence, right? And every single year the 16 days of activism comes to an end, and you know what the latest statistics show? That the violence has increased, and that femicide has increased, and that now we're known as the rape capital of the world, and then now we're known as, you know, femicide being at an exorbitant amount. I just struggle to see what the point of observing these days are if we're not going to put tangible measures to eradicate gender-based violence for good.
Hi, good morning, and thank you once again for having me. I also want to just say, you know, the other day I said, I'm not sure if we see the figures because the media highlights it during 16 days. So for us working, I mean, I work on the Cape Flats daily with gender-based violence, and I see this, and it's almost as if it's highlighted in the media. I want to say that perpetrators go out there and it's like just a field day. So we're not sure if the figures is higher because there's more media attention paid to it and more media reports during 16 days of activism. But I want to say horrific figures. Even if we look at just our stats that came out just before 16 days, our minister, Beke Cele, gave us the stats. 10,590 rape cases were reported, and we know between July and September, and we know that this is 7 times worse because of one rape case, there's 7 others that is not reported. 315 children were murdered during the same period. 13,000 women were victims of assault. So our figures are horrific. Our femicide figures of where women are murdered is even a whore zone, even where there's whore, and we know women are raped and murdered during these atrocities of war. Even in those areas, the femicide, the murders are not as high as in South Africa. I feel like we should be hanging our heads in shame. I looked at the metros that's reporting. I know I've been, you know, and some of these things I want to tell you don't even make the media. In Cape Town the other night, a van was hijacked coming from an event, a catering company. The chefs were stabbed. The young women that was with were gang raped. That didn't even make the media. You know, so we know of so many others that doesn't even get to the media. And coming to the 16 days of activism and highlighting this is great. But you know, what has government got to do? I almost feel like we're paying lip service. We just come from a GBV presidential summit. I was a delegate to the summit. You know, they came with figures that was incorrect, that we know that is not the truth. I hate to say it, but it was like ticking boxes being at the summit, reporting to us of what has transpired since the last summit that we had. But we know it's not true. Yes, we've got the pillars in place. Now we've got the NSP. But how are we going to implement those pillars? We cannot have the best legislation in the country, but we do not resource the legislation. Resource our work so that we can do the work, actual work on this, you know. And so I'm at a, you know, one of the things is that also I want to say to the communities out there, it starts with me and you. It starts in our home. If we start changing and breaking the silence, speaking out. If you see something, say something. I just want to show you, you know, this is how I walk around during 16 days of activism. Silence hides violence. And I do this many, you know, during the year. Because silence hides violence. Violence is continuous because we do not see something, we do not speak out, we do not call out perpetrators. I just want to tell you, you know, we had a woman in our area, a 73-year-old woman that stabbed her husband to death. Not last night, the night before, a 72-year-old husband. So this is after years of abuse. And I'm not saying it's right, but I want to say to women out there, And I want to say, even to men. So we speak about gender-based violence. When we speak about gender-based violence, I also want to acknowledge that I do know that women are also the perpetrators of violence, because often men say, or would say, what about the men being abused? So that's why we're not speaking about violence against women, but we're speaking about gender-based violence. You know, someone said to me, right now in the Cape Flats, we know we've got shootings daily. You hear where you hear it the whole day. And so I want to say the gang violence, once again, so someone asked me, does it affect? Yes, it does affect the gender-based violence.
Yeah.
That violence falls over into the households. So many things to do, so much work to do. You know, I feel so sorry for this auntie that is now sitting in prison at 73 years old. How do we... This woman, and I said, I live a few roads away. This woman should have been asking for help many years before.
You know what, Caroline, it speaks significantly to how we as a community still need to perhaps do away with the way in which we've been socialized, right? And that we cannot have conversations of gender-based violence without the men. It cannot be a woman-led conversation only, because at the end of the day, most of it, though there are those statistics where women are indeed the perpetrators, and let's acknowledge that, but most of the cases, the men are the perpetrators. And how do we have a gender-based violence-related conversation where we don't include the men in it? But unfortunately, we have to leave it here for this morning, simply because time is not on our side. But much appreciated for those insights that you've shared. Something to think about as well as we carry on throughout our day. GBV activist Caroline Peters just giving us the latest in terms of how do we become more active, even way beyond the 16 days. But coming up